Hello, everyone. While we're waiting to get started, feel free to write your name and your affiliation and your state in the chat. Just let us know who's here.
Amy, this is Leslie. It seems like perhaps the chat was disabled for a moment, but I believe that everyone can chat now.
Great. Thanks. Well, if you're just joining us, we're about to get started. Please go ahead and put your name and affiliation and state in the chat so we can all see who's here. And we will go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the latest webinar in our Building the New Forest Future series. My name is Amy Scott. I'm a program manager for the Northern Forest Center based out of Bethel, Maine, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation about preparing young people for emerging career opportunities in the Northern Forest. I think that it goes without saying that for Northern Forest communities to thrive, people that live here need good jobs, and we must create opportunities for people who want to stay here or move to the region. Decline of the paper industry and other wood products manufacturing over the last several decades definitely put a lot of people out of work, and the region has not yet fully recovered from an employment perspective. Many people growing up in the region leave after high school, off for college, or in seek of greater job opportunities elsewhere. The Center's Forest Economy program focuses on workforce issues most directly. We secure financial support and guide project development for mass timber, wood heat, wood-based insulation, and other emerging products. And we help business owners innovate and improve business practices to create and sustain good jobs. From a community revitalization perspective, we're interested in retaining and attracting young people to the region and having an opportunity for meaningful careers. So today's discussion focuses on equipping young people growing up in the region with the knowledge and tools to continue working here once they graduate, especially in jobs that are directly relevant to the place and people's needs here, from outdoor recreation to building trades to forestry. So we are very fortunate to have 4 great panelists with us today. We have Dave Harkless from Littleton Bike and Fitness in New Hampshire. We have Levi Irish from the Cold Hollow Career Center in Vermont. We have Korah Soll from Rural Aspirations here in Maine. And Donna Wotton from Ticonderoga Revitalization Alliance over in New York. So we are going to ask the panelists to give us a sense of and orient us to place and their project and themselves. And we're going to hear from each of them one at a time for about 5 minutes each as they introduce themselves. And then we're going to move into a discussion and questions for the remainder of the webinar. So if you have questions as you're listening, we encourage all of you to please put those in the Q&A rather than right into the chat. And you can put those in at any time. And we're going to have a Q&A session later in the webinar. So with that, I am going to ask Korah Soll from Rural Aspirations in Maine to introduce herself.
Thanks, Amy, and thank you to the Northern Forest Center for inviting me to talk on this topic. It's really important to us, to our communities, and to our organization. Rural Aspirations is a really small nonprofit organization. We were founded in 2014 by a group of veteran educators who were looking at challenges to rural professional development or professional development in rural schools. I spent 16 years in public schools before starting Rural Aspirations. And so I bring a certain level of experience of just working in and trying to navigate around rural schools and rural communities. We started our work in 2014. We began our work by starting a Pathways program at the DRL Stonington High School called a Marine Studies Pathway. There was a high percentage of students at the Deer Isle Stonington School who were fishermen, fisherwomen connected to the fisheries industry, but not connected to school. And so the purpose of that pathway was to design a program where students were learning about their core academics through the lens of fisheries and thinking about fisheries past, present, and future, and helping to get students involved in the industry. So thinking about legislative actions or community initiatives that impact fisheries. In 2015, we continued our work with DRL Stonington High School and developed a visual and performing arts pathway and started to develop out a reputation throughout Maine for developing pathways in rural schools, thematic pathways. We worked with the Eastern Maine Skippers program, which was our first sort of collaborative model. We worked with 9 Down East schools, again, supporting students around engaging in becoming advocates for the future of their local fisheries. We had about 500 students participate in that program, and we developed a collaborative model to support those students. In those early years of Rural Aspirations, we were really trying to figure out what's the magic sauce or the formula that can support rural schools and rural students and rural communities in connecting in with each other. And so what we have developed is there's 3 main components of our organization. All of them are designed to focus on developing and creating community connected schools. So we offer responsive professional development, which is where a school comes to us and says, we have a challenge with our students, with our community, and we need some support with professional development. And so we offer a suite of services to schools to help them to develop those connections to place. So sometimes we're building out science and social studies programs and connecting those to place and really thinking about the K through 12 span. Sometimes we're developing curricular frameworks, and then other times we're creating pathways, just like the pathways I talked to you about with DRL Stonington. Right now, we have pathways programs starting in Belfast. We have a Marine Institute where students are working on connecting to long-term research through the University of Maine and thinking about water temperature, salinity, starting at kelp farm and also a wet lab at their school. We have the local ecology and aspirations pathway at the Telstar High School, which works with students to develop an experiential model where students are learning about the heritage industries of their region and also learning about the career opportunities within their region. We have a natural resource pathway that is well underway at the East Grand School in Danforth, which is over on the other side of the state. And we also have a natural resource pathway at the Katahdin School. And then we're also working with the East Grand School to build out a small business pathway. The East Grand School is in a very small community where there are very few business owners and even fewer storefronts. And there's an aging population of business owners who are trying to think about succession planning. And so we have a group of people that are in that region thinking about what it might look like to start a co-op in a hardware store and then connect that co-op to the school to provide work readiness skills and a connection to the community for the students. So that's the responsive professional development. We also have collaborative models like the Eastern Maine Skippers program, which I spoke about earlier. And that's those programs are a little more organized in that we develop a curricular process, and then we work groups of schools or cohorts of students through that curricular process. Right now, we're working with 6 schools through the Maine Forest Collaborative. So thinking about forest-placed communities and asking students to consider how they use natural resources to positively impact local communities. So students work through a human-centered design process to really help them to understand the challenges that their communities are facing, to think about future vitality, to think about opportunities in their region, and then to offer solutions from a youth perspective. We also have the Northern Maine Outdoor Ed cohort, which is 5 schools that are working with future outdoor recreation entrepreneurs and enthusiasts and helping to build leadership capacity for outdoor recreation in those rural communities. The third part of our organization, the last part of our organization is just staying abreast of what's going on in the state. So really helping to connect schools with the action that's happening in a community. So thinking about economic and community development efforts within a given region or a given sector, and then really participating in those conversations so that we can then articulate that back into the classroom for our students so that they have very relevant information to be able to work through. We participate with 4 Maine, which is the Forest Opportunity Roadmap, supporting growth within the forest products sector, with C Maine, which it brings together leaders from Maine's commercial fisheries, aquaculture, and seafood economy, and Maine West, which is a partner of local and regional organizations working across the economic, education, health, and conservation sectors in Western Maine, and then also just kind of paying attention to what's happening at the Department of Labor, Department of Education, and Department of Economic Development. Ultimately, that network work has really helped us to offer challenge questions to students or to create menus of challenges that are happening in the community so that a teacher can take those challenges and create a human-centered design approach for students to be able to connect to and offer solutions to those challenges. It's also really important for us to connect students in with mentors in the community. And so we're working with 4 schools right now to develop out extended learning opportunity programs, which are internships, mentorships, job shadows, et cetera, opportunities to get students out into the community learning about the opportunities that are right there in their communities for them. There's a saying that says once a Mainer, always a Mainer, and there's a lot of students that grow up in Maine in rural communities. They have been there for generations. They want to stay there, but they don't always see a positive economic future for their communities. So part of our job as an organization is to help them to see that they are part of the future, and that if we can give them the skills to understand challenges and to help to work through those challenges, then we're all working toward community vitality at the same time. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion that comes next.
Thank you so much, Korah. Really appreciate hearing the breadth of what you are working on. Great. So next we'll move to Dave Harkless over in Littleton, New Hampshire.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Harkless. I own Littleton Bike and Fitness. I've been in my bike shop for over 30 years now and learned my trade by apprenticeship. The Littleton area has recently it's kind of like the darling of the North Country, it sounds like to me, because our area is actually, the youth are not all leaving. Younger people are moving into our area. And we kind of chalk a lot of it up to outdoor recreation. So I'm really involved with promoting outdoor rec in our area. We have a local trail system of 25 miles of mountain bike trails. We've revived our local ski hill, a rope tow that I was very involved in. And, we have this cool little community, nice downtown, walkable. And now with a lot of people working remote, we're finding them, some of those people coming into our area, but we're also, like everybody else, trying to keep our youth here. And one of the ways to do that is through outdoor recreation. I'm not only a bike shop owner, but I teach Project Bike Tech. So it is a career technical course through our local CTC in the high school. It's a Hugh Gallen Career Tech Center here in Littleton. And it's a bicycle mechanics course, teaching bike mechanics for 2 years. They have the opportunity of becoming a certified bike assembler after their first year. They pass all the levels. And at the end of the second year, they have the opportunity to become a certified bike mechanic. Now, when we started up this program, got some information, and believe it or not, in the state of New Hampshire, bicycle mechanic was the third most sought after person out there. All the bike shops, and it's the same thing like a lot of the other industries, were aging out, and bike mechanics are very, very hard to get to. On top of that, with the climate change going on, all of our ski areas are figuring out that, hey, the mountain bike season is a heck of a lot longer than the ski season. So they're trying to capitalize on that. So more and more of them are building mountain bike specific trails into their networks, and thus having their ski shops are turning into bike shops during the spring, summer, and fall. And they're just desperate for workers for those things. So bike mechanics is kind of, you don't think of it as that glorious of a job, but it's a very good stepping stone where, you can't be running the rental shop and working your way up through management at a ski area if you don't know how to turn a wrench. And that's what I'm teaching through my program. And also kind of being involved with my bike shop. Then my bike shop is walking distance to the school. So the students get involved. We're walking out on our local trails. We're learning about stewardship of trails. We're learning about land access and how that all works, and also about liability and what protects the landowners. We're learning about how the nonprofit is set up for all the trails. And then I take them down to my bike shop and we start talking about business and how it is to be a small business owner and how tough it can be and how enjoyable it can be also. So it's very dynamic course that we're going through. We don't spend a lot of time in the books. We're hands-on. I'll show you behind me. This is my classroom. So we have 12 workbenches fully set up with professional bicycle tools. We have a fleet of bikes that we work on. And also, we're involved with all our local nonprofits in this area. And believe it or not, we are maintaining roughly 150 bicycles for all the area nonprofits. So our Boys and Girls Club and Copper Canada Camp. And there's also these programs in schools called Riding for Focus, where it's kind of like a gym class, but for kids that have a hard time focusing on what they're doing, it's actually a program by Specialized Bicycles where they give bikes to these schools and they have a curriculum that they're teaching these kids. So they get them out, exercise on the bikes for about 20 to 30 minutes. So that when you put them back in the classroom, they can actually focus on what they're doing, which I actually incorporate into my class too, because as you would figure, being a CTC course, my kids can't sit still very well either. So we do that too. You can see some pictures of various projects that we've done. We've built teeter-totter for our local trails and out there. building bikes. So last year, I think by the end of the year, because I have my bike shop inventory and rentals and all that, I think each kid in my class got to build roughly 6 to 8 bikes per kid over the year, on top of learning all the stuff about the bikes and being involved in it. So it's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun, and I'll turn it back and wait for questions. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the overview. So we'll turn it to Levi Irish from Cold Hollow Career Center. Take it away, Levi.
Hi, everybody. My name is Levi Irish, and I am the co-op coordinator for Cold Hollow Career Center in Enosburg, Vermont. I got my bachelor's of science in rehabilitation services with a concentration in outdoor rec from the University of Maine at Farmington, and a master's in education through Johnson State College in Vermont. And I've been working on advanced leadership since that time. Started my career as an AmeriCorps Vista in Juneau, Alaska, moved around Alaska a bit. Grew up in this region on a dairy farm and spent some time teaching, but also had some great experiences working in construction. Spent my life in the sugar bush as well. And after about a decade in special ed, I came into economic development through my community, as well as ended up with this job being a co-op coordinator, which has been awesome. Through some volunteering, I got to meet a couple of former students of the programming at our career center, who'd recently purchased a business called Vermont Natural Forest Products in Richford, Vermont. It was a non-operational sawdust and shavings and pellet mill. Volunteered to write a grant with them, got connected with the Northern Forest Center through that. And as somebody who loves the land and learning, I quickly became interested, couldn't learn enough about this industry. I realized that as educators, we're not doing enough capacity building, and I've been working with former students through that role, and have gotten to work with them on leadership. And at the same time, I've gotten to do a lot of really neat learning, from troubleshooting a pellet mill to getting to operate some awesome heavy equipment. So I am actually really lucky because I have the best job in the entire world, bringing young people into these jobs. We have forestry, construction, and business. We do a lot of like primary and tertiary forest industry businesses. So Amy, can we pull up my slides, please? So when we're looking at our slides, up in the corner, you'll see Franklin County, and that's where we are located. And we serve all the towns. We serve Berkshire, Richford, Enosburg, Montgomery, Bakersfield, Sheldon, Fairfield. And then we actually have a lot of kids that are bordering Lake Champlain as well. And because Vermont is such a small state, geographically, we travel all over the state with our kids, at least in the northern half, if not further. Next slide, please. And so these are our employability skills that we work on with our students. And this is kind of what drives our work. And as we work with teams trying to determine how we bring kids into the workforce, so where we want them to be learning. If we could stop screen sharing, please. I have a number of guests with me that are helping because, again, capacity building is incredibly important. And I would like to introduce you all to your next generation of industry professionals. So come on up here, guys. And if you could just say your name and introduce yourself, step ahead so that people can see you.
AJ Dennett.
Owen Kinney. Brady Farrar.
Right in there.
Braden Colburn.
John Carpenter.
So thank you for having us all, and I welcome you to ask the young men with me today specific questions as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Levi, and your whole crew there. It's excellent. So next and last for panelists, we're going to hear from Donna Wotton from Ticonderoga Revitalization Alliance over in New York. Thanks, Donna.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate being included in this, and a really interesting discussion. As you can see, there's lots of creative ideas that are helping our communities to build a local workforce. Ticonderoga Alliance is actually an economic development nonprofit. But not only do we do work on things like business development, but we work on foundational elements of our economy, like housing and childcare, and especially workforce development. Like sort of many towns in our areas and in your areas, for decades, our largest export was our young population, and people would joke about that, but it wasn't really funny. They would leave here to find their fame and fortune because they didn't feel like there was anything here for them. And as a result, we have a really aging workforce here, especially in the construction and service industries. So about 4 years ago in 2018, we had this idea to partner with our schools and employers to see if we could get some of the students interested in actually staying here and working in these service jobs by creating a connection between the students and the jobs and the employers, and getting them exposed to and interested in things that there are to do right here in the Ticonderoga area. And the program started as something that we called contractors in the classroom, where we were bringing contractors into the classroom to teach a skill, and it was in the technology class. And so they would teach a skill, and the kids really sort of connected to that. And we thought we were really off and running with something good there. And then COVID hit, and it all went away. Students went away, program went away. But when students started to come back to school, we thought there must be another way for us to be able to do this within the restrictions. And so we found if we could really connect them with some of these jobs and industries that we have here in our community, that we could really change the way they feel about being here. So we created, instead of contractors in the classroom, we created something called students in the field. And students, so we have sort of three major components of our program right now. One is students in the field, one is a job fair program, and one is a scholarship program. I'll talk very briefly about each of those. Students in the field is just that we were able to take 5 or 6 kids at a time to a work location, a site of some sort, to see all of the jobs that there were there. So it was a construction site, or these are all in sort of skilled labor areas, but it could be something like IT or healthcare, sort of anything that takes less than 2-year degrees, basically, to be able to have a good job in this area. And so we take them out to the work locations. We talk to the people there that do these jobs, and we talk to them like really honestly. The kids get to ask a lot of questions. We have them talk about what they love about their work, what they don't love about their work, how they got into the field and the circuitous route that they might have taken, and all the things that they did before, including like going to jail and things like that. So that the kids can see that there isn't necessarily a linear path to whatever ultimately ends up being your occupation. So we've had really great cooperation from local employers who have been very enthusiastic about this program. We have over 45 employers now that are participating in one way or another. And then we're adding a new component this year to bring professionals back into the classroom in a variety of career areas. So that's now a very mature program that is really producing some results. We've had a really big change in the way our whole community, not just the students, but their parents and their grandparents, who are highly influential, are really thinking about jobs in this area and jobs in the trades and the skills. In 2018, there were 8 students from Ticonderoga High School that attended our BOCES CV Tech skills training, vocational training school. And this fall, there are 55. So in 4 years, we went from 8 students to 55 that are actively getting their skills. That amounts to almost 50% of our junior and senior class. That used to, our numbers of kids going to college haven't changed. It's still about 50%. But what the kids who are not going to college are doing has changed dramatically. We also have a job fair that we do, a summer job fair in the spring. And we've taken a different approach to that as well, where we really prep the employers and the students ahead of time with a whole catalog of jobs and things that they can look at ahead of time, applications that they can fill out. And this year, I think we had 87 interviews scheduled prior to, or 45 scheduled prior to the actual job fair, and a total of 87 conducted at a one-day job fair. So it really incredible impact there in terms of connecting students with employment when they get interested in something. An interesting thing that happened in this year's job fair was that we had almost no seniors in the pool of employees in the job fair. And it was because they already had jobs. Either they were graduating and they already had a job, full-time job set up by CV Tech, or they had a job that they were going back to from a previous year. So that's really changed our seasonal employment landscape, and really changed the landscape for graduating seniors. So the third component of our program is in the scholarship area, where we've been able to give in just 3 years over $90,000 worth of scholarships to students that are going on to post-secondary programs of 2 years or less. So skills training programs in nursing, forestry, welding, construction, all kinds of different occupations where they're going to get more training in those things. So the integration of all these things has just made a tremendous impact on the number of young people that are choosing to stay here because they know that there is a job for them in something that they'd like to do. And in our community in general, the participation of the employers that is much more active. It was very passive before, where they were mostly despondent about we have no employees. And now they're actively involved in nurturing and training their next employees. So all these things together with the partnership of our counselors and our administrators at school and teachers there and the employers has been very, very effective in our community.
Great, Donna. Thank you so much for that introduction. If I could ask all the panelists to come back on screen, we can shift into more of a discussion and a conversation here. I think it's amazing that each of you are in your own different way and specific to your region, and Korah, in your case, across the state, are really working to connect students directly with employers, with community partners, working through the schools and setting up systems through those schools and getting the schools more connected to the communities, really setting kids up to have relationships with their employers or the employers that they get some exposure to at some point in the process. And that connection and that relationship just really struck me in listening to all of you speak about what you are doing. That this isn't just kind of workforce development 101 general. This is very specific to the needs and opportunities and the assets and the things that people care about in these communities specifically. So I'd love to ask any of you who want to respond to talk a little bit more about more than what you've already shared about how you really cultivate that connection between the young people and each of those partners, employers, how you cultivate that and nurture that, and on both sides, both for the adult mentors or employers on that side, as well as on the student side. And then also speak to any challenges that you've had with that. Does anybody want to start? Donna?
I'll start. I think, Dave talked to this too. one of the things is giving them real hands-on experience so that they become really interested, invested in, and actually, find things that they really like to do. This, a lot of the kids are really finding. We have in students in the field, we give them a catalog of all of the different things that they could do this year. We have them pick some that they would like to do, so we know which ones are the most popular and stuff. But we also ask them to choose one that they would not be interested in, and we try to get them to go on that trip, because more often than not, it's completely different than they thought it was going to be, and they really liked it. Sometimes that's the one that they end up being really interested in and wanting to get more training in. And also just the hands-on anything gets them to explore it in a little bit more detail. But also for us, there needs to be, and I think with all of these programs, there's a real honesty about it, where we don't want the employer to sell to the students, really. We want to talk to all of the people in the organization, from the lowest to the owner, and have them talk about their experience there and their path to it. So some of these discussions we'll talk about it ahead of time, and I definitely prep the employers for these things. And they're like, can I say that? Can I say I went to jail, or can I say I was a drug addict or whatever? I'm like, yeah, you can say that. And, kids find themselves in some of these things in a way, and they might connect to that employer, or they might connect to that skill in some way. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Does anyone else want to jump in? Korah?
I guess I would just say, and just maybe sort of remind everyone here that, education traditionally is a relatively passive process in a traditional school. Kids sit in desks, a teacher stands in the front. And so that, what Levi is doing and what Dave are doing, that's different than what a traditional classroom offers. And the students, and I think maybe the students in Levi's class can talk a little bit about this, but the difference between being active in your learning and having a contribution, understanding that you have a responsibility to your community, versus being passive and letting that happen all around you and feeling like, I don't really care about that because that doesn't really impact me. So a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to help kids to see that the impact is yours and it is your future that you're building. And so you have to prepare and be ready for that if you're going to be activated community members in the future, and that you have a responsibility to that, a generational responsibility in some cases to that in your community. So I'd be interested in hearing from Levi's students on the difference between what they're doing in Levi's program versus the experiences that they've had in a traditional classroom.
I would love for them to share. I'm going to give them a minute here because they're feeling a little anxious about this. But I think in the meantime, when we're thinking about getting community involved in this and getting our students involved in this, one of the things is I think about co-oping and getting students into work sites that's very controversial in our communities, is that I don't allow students to co-op for their families. And the rationale behind this is that we want them bringing something new home, a skill that families don't have. So last year I had a student who chose to get his CDL because we're working to fund a commercial driver's license program. We had 8 graduates last year and we have 13 signed up this year. And so, family business, this young man left ready to drive, and that was awesome. So he was able to bring something new home. I think that I've got a gentleman ready to come up here, and I'm going to preface it with, we're looking to build a state-of-the-art sugar house on site for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is because we believe that it's our job to help young people learn to manage operations, but it's also our job to help them get ready to start them, which includes grant writing, it includes fundraising, it includes the publicity that goes along with that, the business planning, the contacts that they need to have. And so these guys have kind of been with us from start to finish. And we also think that we're sick of looking at our local sugaring industries stare at cameras to show state-of-the-art facilities when these guys could be hosting state-of-the-art facilities and be the next gen for running it. We know that automation is where we're going, like it or not. So like, we want the leaders, you know, we want to have the first 10% of leaders here. So Owen, do you mind coming up and talking a little bit about how you view your responsibility in the sugar house to the rest of the community?
How you mark?
So what are some of the things that you think can be happening in the sugar house that we can't do now?
In the new sugar house, we won't be able to teach anybody.
We can't
We
now.
can't now. We will be able to teach people.
So who do you think that you'll be able to teach? How do you think you'll be able to expose more
Younger
people to what?
kids.
Younger kids?
The younger kids, yeah,
Outside people, the public.
be able to come see it and find their interest.
So what do you think the perception of a lot of older people are of youth today?
That we're not worth nothing. Our generation
Lazy.
shop
And how do you change that?
by doing this.
Prove it.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about one of the classes that we had to come to visit last year and what you guys were able to accomplish with that? Can you say it louder?
The second graders,
And what were you able to do with second graders?
teach them how to operate equipment and stuff.
So my second grade daughter got to run a log loader with these young men. That's a pretty impressive opportunity for a second grader to have. Anybody else have any feedback about your responsibility for learning and the impact that has on your community? Do you want to talk about last week when we went to?
Yeah. Last week we met with a representative from the state and we were better able to figure out how to be more social with the rest of the state, but also at the same time get our name out there. So it kind of in a roundabout world helps everyone. And we are just more welcoming to the community by being able to build this new sugar house that's like within a mile for 3 schools.
Yeah. So they see it as a teaching facility where they get to, as juniors and seniors, pass on their knowledge instead of waiting to enter the adult workforce. And, you know, the value of bringing that to second and third graders or even kids younger. So do you guys have other specific questions for this group around that?
I would just say that when you develop those connections with your students, and kudos to you guys for working through that project, but you know, when they raise their families and they're in those communities, they're going to see their connection to school. And I think that's really the conversation that we need to be having is who, and we, you know, it's sort of a cliche, whose job is it to raise our kids, but what Donna is doing in the community to bring the community businesses into the school, and what Levi and Dave are doing to show the kids how small business operates, really changes the narrative around whose job it is to teach our kids, because all of us need to do it together, especially if we're working toward vital places in rural communities that are pretty depressed right now.
I'd like to point out that there's a lot of discussion and talk here specific to some of the sectors and the trends that are happening in the sectors that are relevant to your communities. Dave, you spoke about this earlier with what's going on in the outdoor recreation industry. And I'd kind of like to turn it back to you to say a little bit more about that. Like, are there other trends that you're following in the community, or are there kids who don't necessarily see themselves in outdoor recreation, but kind of see that as a learning opportunity, and so they get involved for that reason? Or, you know, do people get, do any of the kids get concerned? Well, I'm not interested in outdoor recreation, so what do I do? You know, where do I go? I'm curious about that interplay, and I'm asking you, Dave, but anyone to start us, kick us off, but the others can chime in as well, because you're all dealing with places that have, you know, there's not a huge, vast, you know, array of opportunities. There's things that are specific to the community and to the industries that are there. Dave, do you want to speak to that first?
Sure. Yeah. So let's take my class this year. I have the largest by far class I've ever had. This is my 4th year doing it, and I have 16 kids in my class, and I got the whole expanse of them for sure. And there's 3 or 4 kids that are really into bikes, and the rest of them just kind of ended up in my class. A bunch of them have already taken automotive. Some guidance counselors, end up finding holes in spaces, and this kid needs a class, and they end up in my class. So I realized they're not all going to go into outdoor recreation, and probably only a few of them could end up working at bike shops. But then, as part of the whole career tech center thing, is we're supposed to be teaching them about workplace ethic, about working together, because very rarely do you actually go into work and work by yourself, especially in these hands-on businesses. So you have to learn how to work with somebody. So I'm teaming my kids up, and I'm mixing them up all the time, so they're not working with their best friend all the time, and kind of pointing those things out to them, and get them kind of used to these things. So not only teaching them how to work on bikes, but teaching them about the tools, how to use tools, how to safely use tools. Levi's probably going to bob her head about that one, because it's a pretty dangerous industry in the forest products. But bike mechanics is a whole lot better. I'm not going to get squished by a skidder, but it's just a whole bunch of things like that, and then teaching them the whole responsibility of things, so that when they actually get out of my classroom, they have the knowledge, they can problem solve. That's one of the biggest things nowadays with younger generations. How to do things hands-on, how actually to problem solve something without just Googling it and figuring out. So it's important that way, and I think it'll help. And then I really just have to say, like, half the reason I think a bunch of kids are in my classes, I make it fun. We have a good time. We're going to be out tomorrow walking on our local trails. We just got a grant for all new signage, and most of the signs are up, but we still have some more signs put up. So we're going to take a nice walk on the trails, do some signage, talk about how important it is, and kind of relate it into the educational format. So yeah, it's fun.
Thank you. Excellent. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Or do any of the students want to talk about any of what they just heard from Dave?
So I think that they all want you to see their hats because they're very proud of them. Okay, I do need to show you this forestry hats. But I think one of the things that we're working on really closely to develop is recognizing that the forest industries are much bigger than just what we're seeing here right now, and they're expanding. And so one of the cool things that we have going on is that we're working to orchestrate a log truck training here as well, because we know that we need log truck drivers, as well as what we've been working on. And yeah, I think that that's one of the many ways that we're trying to reach industry needs versus just local industry needs, because we recognize that our local industry needs are more limited. The kids definitely have some concerns about what their life can look like staying here. And I think that sitting at this table, how many people have a family business that's in the agriculture or forestry at this point? Okay, so all 5 of these young people have that here. And so that gives them a bit more opportunity than kids that we see coming into it without any connections at all.
Thank you, Levi.
I think that that's also all the more reason to teach students to be innovative and to really think about the heritage of their legacy industries, but also think about the future of those industries and how they're going to play a role in developing out what that industry looks like in the future. Without that problem solving that Dave talked about, or without those essential work readiness skills, then the students are not feeling like they are capable problem solvers. They're, again, passive. And so moving them into that innovative space and really helping them to learn how to problem solve from the start to the finish is a really important skill that all of these other organizations are working hard to do with kids.
With my consent.
Donna, did you want to say something? Oh, sorry.
One of the things that our BOCES CV Tech organization has, does everybody know what that is? BOCES is New York State education system for vocational and special education, and CV Tech is our local school here in the North Country that teaches all of the vocational education. And one of the things that they are very, very strong in, that's really helping our students really get into the workforce and be employable, is they have a really strong employment readiness program, workforce readiness program, that really connects the kids with what's going to be required of them when they get into the workforce. And it, you know, the combination of the hands-on learning and taking responsibility for what you're doing in that hands-on situation, and translating that to your community and what's going to be expected of you as a human being, as an adult, when you get out of that program, is really critical. How to be a good employee, how to, as Dave said, how to work with others in the workplace, how to be motivated and creative in what you do and what you contribute to your workplace. All of those things are really strong here. And that's been a deficit in our community. And one of the reasons why our young people have not been particularly connected to the community and particularly successful at working here in this environment. So, giving them the ambition of being the successors to the people who work in this community now, you know, the people who are likely their parents and grandparents, as especially their grandparents who are aging, baby boomers, and aging out of the workforce. There are businesses to take over with succession. And, you know, like Levi's students, you know, these are students that are going into perhaps their home businesses, their family's businesses, not only ready to work in those businesses, but to lead them into the future. And having that workforce readiness and expectation of how to really contribute to your family, your society, and your community is really a major effort on the part of BOCES CV Tech here.
I think one thing I'd like to kick in on that too is that I failed to mention is one of the biggest things with the career tech schooling that we have that Levi's offering and then I'm offering in our career tech center here, and also Donna's putting in with, is these kids can get out of our program and go to work and not have a student loan, or if they're continuing on, maybe they need to do 1 year or so at community college, so that actually, you know, they don't have to have this huge 6-figure salary just to keep their head afloat. You know, they can come in. Typically North Country doesn't pay as well as down south and in the urban areas, but that's changing rapidly around here in Littleton, New Hampshire. Right now, I can tell you minimum wage is about $17.50 an hour right now. You know, it can be whatever you say it is, but you're not going to get anybody if you're asking if you're paying less than that. So it is turning into higher paying salaries around here. But the student loan thing is a huge thing. So you know, if kids can go to work in the trades with a very low loan or no loan, I think that's huge.
I'd like to just jump in on that. That's a great point, Dave. For our scholarship program, when we developed our scholarship program, we said, okay, we always start from the place of what's the challenge here and how do we back up from the challenge and say, you know, how do we resolve it? So one of the things here in our community is we have a great deal of poverty here, and a lot of students don't think that they are going to college, not because they don't want to, or vocational, additional vocational education in a 2-year or 1-year certification program or something, but they simply know that they do not have the money to do that, and they don't have the resources to be able to get beyond that stop point. And in our scholarship program, we said from the beginning, what is it that prevents any student with the ambition of going on for additional training? What prevents them from doing that? If that's financial, we will remove that barrier. So we work with whatever school they choose, or whatever program they choose. We work with that to get them all the financial aid that they can possibly get. And at the end of that, there's a nut still of sometimes up to $10,000 a year or something, even at a state school, where they have to pay for room and board or childcare or whatever else is is the barrier in the way. And we will get them a car so that they can commute, whatever it is. That's part of our scholarship, is that we will remove whatever that financial barrier is. And most of these kids are getting $6,000 to $7,000 a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, to remove that barrier. And we don't give them a complete free ride. They have to have some skin in the game. They got to work in their summers to put money away. And obviously they're going to have a job if they're, really working towards something. And you got to have some skin in the game. But whatever's left, we're going to take that away and remove that barrier. So not having too many restrictions on how you remove those barriers is a really critical thing.
Great, thank you, Donna.
So
Go ahead.
I have at least one of my young men here who would really like to share part of his story. And I think it's going to kind of be a question and answer, but I think it's really important. It's maybe a story that we've heard a million times, but it's still one that I find absolutely heartbreaking every single time that I hear it, because it tells us that we're doing something wrong as educators. So Brady, can you talk a little bit about what it's been like to be in school for you for the past 12 years?
It's not easy. It's hard.
Have you felt like you're successful in a classroom?
No. I learn hands-on.
And was there times in your academic experience where you're like, I'm super smart, like I feel really smart and I feel really good about myself?
Yeah, here.
Okay. Aren't we doing something wrong that we're waiting until kids are 10th, 11th, 12th graders before we're saying, you know what, you are brilliant. You are worth it. You're able to do all these things that I am not capable of. I look at some of the smartest people that I know in industry. They're so capable. Yet we've sat them in this system that doesn't work for so many years to tell them how broken they are. And then we expect them to lead us. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So thank you for sharing your story. And I know that there's a lot of people sitting at this table and a lot of adults sitting here that have similar stories.
Thank you, Levi, and students for sharing. And that's actually a great segue to a question I'd like to put to Korah, which is, Korah, who is working with schools and on changing just what you're pointing out, Levi, across many different school systems. And I wonder, Korah, if you could just speak to that a little bit more and speak to the power of reconnecting schools in some cases with their communities and with the opportunities that are there, and using place for part of the learning as a way of raising aspirations for kids and opening doors in ways that the longstanding traditional way of teaching has not necessarily done for all students and all learners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that rural educators are really aware of the fact that they have a good percentage of students in their classes who are hands-on learners, who are not responding to that traditional method. So what we do is we essentially just provide time for teachers to be able to look at their curriculum and find ways to get kids outside, to get kids activated, to really enliven the curriculum. And by doing that, starting at pre-K, K, first, second grade, then you provide more and more of those opportunities for students like Levi's students to feel successful in their educational career, and also providing opportunities and making sure that we're providing opportunities in the middle level and in the high school level for students to become activated. So, most teachers I guess I won't say most, but many teachers in rural areas come from the rural areas that they teach in, and they also have strong roots in those communities. And so, when you put teachers like that together, they know how to activate kids. They just don't always have the time and the opportunity to be able to come together and really analyze and think about their curriculum, nor do they often have the support. A lot of the schools that we're working with don't have curriculum coordinators. They don't have assistant principals. There's really one person in leadership that's running a K through 12 system. And so the other piece is really getting everyone behind and understanding the skills and knowledge that students need to be successful in a particular region. So connecting community and business into that conversation to say, what are the skills and knowledge that our future grads need? And then how do we scaffold that back into the K through 12 system to be able to offer opportunities for students to gain the skills and knowledge that's very specific to a region or to a community or to a sector, a legacy industry like fisheries or farming or forestry. The other thing I would say is a couple of years ago, there was a study done, the Rural Youth Futures at University of Maine, and they studied aspirations of students in Piscataquis and Upper Somerset counties, and they had about 570 kids that were part of that study. And not only, just like Donna said, money is a challenge and is a barrier, but the other challenge and barrier that students brought up was not being smart enough and not knowing the right people. And so really that's our job in looking at curriculum development within schools, is where are the opportunities that we can help kids see that they are smart enough, that they are having an impact, but that they also know the right people. We all come from relatively small states, and so the networks are actually they're right there. So once a student gets to know that person that's from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, or knows that person that's running the mechanized logging program, then they feel connected and able to potentially pursue those opportunities. So money, yes, we have to create those pathways. We also have to make sure that kids feel smart enough and strong enough to be able to reach for their aspirations, whatever those might be.
Excellent. Thank you, Korah. Kind of building on that and also responding to a question that's come in from the audience. I mean, it sounds like, Korah, what you're describing is in some cases that that process leads to some curriculum change, but perhaps it also leads to pathways or programs, like some of the ones that you've described. And there is a question that came in that is asking about, what really drove the programs, Levi, the program you're running, and Dave, the program you're running, what really drove these and catalyzed them to get off the ground. And actually, Donna, I think this same question would apply to your program. So if anyone wants to start and just kind of share that origin story. Levi, go ahead.
I would love to. So the program that I'm in is roughly 40 years old. I have to tell you, part of my passion for it is that I have 3 little brothers. 2 dropped out of high school, 1 got a GED out of the 2. The other little brother would have dropped out if sending school wouldn't have pushed to get him here earlier. And he was in forestry. I'm pretty sure that it authentically saved his life. I don't know as though he would be alive today without this program. He now works in the forest industries. And I think that the better question for our programming is not what got it off the ground, but what drives it. And so now it's like, how do we meet the next generation? How do we know what they're going to need? Unfortunately, our local forester that serves on our board is Charlie Hancock. Also works closely with Northern Forest Center, amazing person who helps keep us where we need to be. And we work with industry all over the place. I think that intimate involvement with as much industry as we can have and being authentic with them, having them on our boards, businesses that I work with, I've been fortunate, would say that I try to develop a true understanding and listen to their needs from multiple sectors within the industry, involving myself with every angle. And I think that to us is more important than what got it off the ground. It's what keeps us relevant and what keeps us moving in the direction that you all need us to go in order to best meet your needs, because that's why we're here. So.
Fact.
Great, thank you.
So
Dave?
my program got started. So Project Bike Tech was actually up in the Lindenville area up by Kingdom Trails. And there was, they started 2 years before my program. And one of the kids that was in that program was racing mountain bikes on a team with a kid from down in our area. And that kid was probably a lot like Brady in school, and really hadn't found himself yet. And like, I want to do this. And he went to his parents. They went up and viewed the system up in Linden and came back, and they were actually going to send the kid up to that school, which 45-minute drive each morning and back and forth each morning. They were willing to do that for their son, so he wouldn't be just floundering in school. But they mentioned it to their guidance counselor, and she reached out to, they didn't have a career tech center at that school. It's Profile in Bethlehem, but they're a sending school for us. So that guidance counselor made the call to our CTC director, and who I happen to know, and my wife's in administration at school, so blah, blah, blah. Next, you know, we're going to visit the program. And they took Perkins money and funded it for the first 2 years as a probationary program. And here we are. So pretty dynamic. But the nice thing is my program, because it is new in the Career Tech Center line of things. So we are like the little golden child up here. So I've heard over in Conway, they're starting this Project Bike Tech. And there's a local ski mountain right there that needs techs. And there's 11 bike shops in Conway, North Conway area. They're all dying for techs. So those kids are going to get jobs right out the door.
Thanks, Dave. Donna, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think, to Dave's story too, ours is really organic. We had just this really devastating lack of workforce here that a lot of people were whining and complaining about, and just not feeling empowered maybe to do anything about it. And that was something that seemed to Thai Alliance like low-hanging fruit. Let's just start somewhere. The first contractors in the classroom thing was a shot in the dark. Could we, the superintendent of schools at the time was a good friend of mine, and he and I talked one day, and I said, what about if we started bringing some people, like, what can we do? Like, identify the different areas where, particularly in the service industry and contracting and things like that, that we had such a shortage in, and we still do. I mean, we haven't solved it yet, but we're getting a generation of kids who are interested, because most kids here in our community have exposure to whatever the occupation of their parents are, some who don't have occupations, and a few relatives and their teachers, and that's about all they really have exposure to. So how are they supposed to know what's out there? So that was our first impetus, was to go into the schools with a couple of different people and just go into this tech classroom. And it just exploded from there. All of the different people that we had volunteer to come into the classrooms, we said, would you do this? And they said, absolutely, I would do this. And I'm like, well, okay, then, and when that went south because of COVID, we just flipped it on the other side and said, can we come see you? And then that expanded into, an even bigger program. Now we're going to expand it one more time into professionals back into the classroom. So I think looking for that to solve something, just, get something going, and it snowballs. Lots of things come up because you get more people playing on the field. And they have great ideas. A lot of our employers have given us the best ideas about how to fine tune things or retool something or whatever. They're like, it would be great if when kids came here, we did this, and let's do that. Little restriction, lots of open invitation for everybody to participate. I think, part of it was just inviting people to participate. And they got excited about it. And it has really swept through our community. You know, the first year, I think we had about maybe 15 employers were willing to come into the classroom. We now have most of the employers in our town that are willing to do a students in the field thing or into the classroom. You know, they all see the benefit of this and how it's panning out. So, you know, open the doors, invite everybody in.
I think that's a lot about what Rural Aspirations is doing is just bringing folks together and asking questions. And it all starts with the questions, but then you have to kind of have a process to be able to follow up. And once people see action, just like Donna was just talking about, then they start to realize that it's not just talk, that it is about building something that is actionable and that is relatable and that is responsive to your community. And it can look really different in a lot of different communities, like a Marine Institute or a forest pathway, right? Depending on the needs of the community. But starting with that conversation from a hopeful place and really starting to see, like, what are the things that we can be doing to respond to the challenges in our community, and how do we get kids involved? That's really how it all starts.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned hope. It's actually been a theme throughout this entire webinar series around that, the role of hope in solving a lot of these issues and challenges that our rural communities are facing, that either, you know, finding or paying attention to or drawing attention to a sense of hope, cultivating it in young people it's a critical piece to this whole challenge. So thank you for bringing that up as well. We did have a question that was a little more technical about the workforce readiness curriculum and an interest in, you know, what are the topics that are a part of that. So I'd like to ask that question for whoever wants to answer it, because it sounds like that is something that is part of all three of the programs with Donna, Dave, and Levi, and Korah, I'm sure you've seen some of it in programs that you're working with as well. Donna, do you want to jump in?
That's one of in the very early days of our organization, about 10 years ago, we worked with the National Workforce Readiness Program, which is a national program. I think it's through the EDA. It's a federal program, but they have a full curriculum of workforce readiness training that includes everything from like personal budgeting, workforce etiquette, you know, dressing for success, you know, all of those types of things. And it's a full year's course for high school students. And we were teaching it, and at the end of it, they take an exam and they get a workforce readiness credential, which is fairly well respected in employment circles for entry-level work. But our school had budget cuts and it went away in the budget cuts. And we weren't as involved at that time because we probably would have gone and found a grant to keep it going. But it came down to a teacher that could or could not be freed up to teach that course. But all of this, for a couple of years, every senior in our school was going through, regardless of what their aspirations were, they were all graduating with a workforce readiness credential. Now, for us, it's an even better version of that is taught at CV Tech. And Sarah asked about it in the chat here, and I'll connect her with the folks up there. They took the workforce readiness credential program and just put it on steroids and really work it into everything about what they teach there. And those students are really well prepared when they come out of them.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to chime in?
I would say it's part of my program too, but not an extensive full year program. So in my curriculum, it's also resume writing, job interviewing, and also we talk about budgets. And in this particular high school, I believe every student goes through a personal finance class, which is pretty good. And then there's also a business class for the voc tech that a lot of the kids are going through. So I tell one of the neat things about my program is they're allowed in at freshmen into my program, whereas a lot of the voc techs, they're waiting until they're like juniors or seniors to expose them to it. I like it because I get these younger kids, they're still into bikes. Some of these kids are still into bikes. They don't have cars yet, they don't have a license yet. So there's a little interest there. But it also gives them a chance to, one of my best students that came through my program and ended up fully certified is now a senior, and he's in his second year of automotive. So he's going to be a fully certified bike mechanic, and he's going to be a certified auto mechanic to some level. It's like this kid's going to be able to go wherever he wants, but to be able to taste different voc tech classes is really kind of neat. And one of the big things that comes down to is really the guidance counselors. You're talking about the question of education, how are we failing our kids? And I'm not that involved. I'm the outsider in this school. I walk through the hallways and half the people don't know who the hell I am because I hide down in my corner in this room and I only teach one block a day. But it's like for the first 3 years, I never saw a guidance counselor. They never came down. They didn't know what the program was about. But this year we have a new guidance counselor. She's been down twice already. I just think that's a game changer. And all of a sudden, look at this. I got 15 kids in my class. I think, I'm not sure how they rank guidance counselors or how they think it's important, but I think an important step is somehow retraining the focus of guidance counselors. It's not important to get every single kid into a 2-year or 4-year college. It's important to get them to feel successful and smart, and that's Levi's kids are very smart. If they're running those operations, they're very smart. They might not be able to pass the calculus test, but whatever, it's all relative. So I think it's some training in the guidance counselor area that really needs to happen.
Go ahead, Donna.
Just on that note, our guidance counselors have been our best partners. And we really got involved with them. And we thought when we first asked them if we could get involved, that they would be resistant to that. What do we know about, their work or education or whatever, nothing, we had 2 guidance counselors for over 300 kids in our school system, 2 guidance counselors. So those 2 people are every day helping those kids that want to go to college search and find where they want to go and what they want to do and do their applications and their essays and whatnot. And then they have a lot of students that are on the other end of the scale that are in crisis in one way, shape, or form. And everything from truancy to drugs and suicide, family issues. And those 2 people spend their day in those 2 areas. You're either on the top end of the spectrum or you're on the bottom end of the spectrum. And then about 50% of our kids or more sit in the center. And if you are not in crisis or working on an application to college, they just do not have the bandwidth to help all of those kids. And so that we found that, if we were willing to help them in that middle category there, and that they were wide open to our participation. And they have proven to be really, really good partners in that way.
Thank you, Donna. Go ahead, Levi.
So my program's really unique in that when we look at what our teachers have to teach, there's state-based standards and, there's the workforce readiness, but we do a lot of how do we meet math standards? How do we meet ELA standards? When we're looking at what we're coming up with, it's forestry management techniques and again, a lot of safety standards. We make sure that our kids leave with game of logging 1 through 4 in forestry specifically, as well as OSHA 10 for every program that we offer, and first aid, CPR. But I think, again, more like what I do in co-op, I have the opportunity to really take learning where it needs to be. And I think as we're moving forward, we're thinking about really reaching out with like our focal points want to be business plans, introduction to all these community resources and connections, because a lot of our students are saying they're leaving and they're not like they have us as supports, but nobody's heard of the Northern Forest Center, right? Like even the businesses that I work with until there's that connection. And that's just one of so many. And so we want to make sure that they're set up with Vermont Farm and Forest Viability, our Sugar Makers Association, stuff like that. We really want to work on management as a standard and, both of people and of capital. The business planning, we work really hard on public speaking. We've actually placed in the state for FFA competitions for a very long time. And our kids place in you got first, second, and third in your sugar maker competitions last year, statewide. And, grant writing and management, leadership strategies, managing workplace conflict. I think that another area that we're not doing well enough in a lot when we have kids leave school is hazardous occupations and the risk mitigation, which is also a huge issue for getting the kids into these industries. Because in the state of Vermont, I was like, okay, where does sugaring fall in? And they're like, federally, it falls into food and beverage. And in Vermont, it falls into parks and recs. And we spent 3 weeks with attorneys trying to figure out if my kids could use a saw after having previous training in the woods. That's not acceptable. It's not okay. It's hurting industry. And so, it's just really meeting those needs and heading toward that, as well as the workplace readiness skills.
Great, thank you. So I just want to ask one final question, which it's a larger question about the sort of the adult side and the current leader side of all of this. But in what ways do each of you work with your the leaders in your communities and in the industry to change view and change mindset about the potential that young people have and the possibilities that they can bring in entering a program or in going to college or in interning or apprenticing or whatever it is. How do you address some of those biases that current adults and leaders in place may have right now about the generation right now of young people? Go ahead, Donna.
Communication. We are absolutely merciless in our communication that we send out. We are absolutely shameless in self-promoting these programs. The successes of individual students, the successes of employers that find their employees locally, we promote it through our social media, lots of stories in our newsletters. We have my friends harass me all the time because almost every week I'm in the paper for something, and it's usually related to students in education. Some student that we sent on a special trip somewhere, something else that we facilitated, and we don't care. I don't care how many times I'm in the paper. It's a little embarrassing, but it also has really, over the last 3 years, I would say, absolutely changed the way our community thinks about these programs and how much they're willing to participate, how much they're willing to encourage their students, their children and grandchildren to get involved in these. It's radically changed how our community feels, and it's about putting it out there. Every single opportunity that you have, every single victory, put it out there, and get a partner at your local paper to help you, and you can change the way they feel about it.
That's excellent, Donna. Thank you. And in our last few minutes, anyone else want to chime in on that topic? Levi, then Korah.
I think there's a million ways that we do this, but I am not the person to tell you this, because if we want to change perception, that's not my job. Whose job is that? So how are you changing perception?
So show up here every day, we do things in the community.
that's it. They show up every day. They do things in the community.
Excellent, thank you. Korah, you wanted to,
Well, I was just gonna say, creating a platform for students and adults to really connecting meaningful ways. And I was actually gonna bang it back to Levi's kids to say, what do you think adults need to know about you? Like, what are the things that you want the adults to know about the work that you put into your projects?
Okay, what do you want people to know about the work that you put in, you guys? What's important?
What's important about the work that we put in?
Yeah, what is important to know about you guys and why you do what you do and the work you put in?
Oh, someone else say something.
Give back to the community.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know. We're here to make things different, better.
Persuade.
that's a huge statement. We're here to make things different and better.
Mhm.
Like to,
We're here to be us, I guess.
anything else, guys?
Trying to make a future in this industry, I guess.
Keep America going.
Okay.
America.
I think the what I hear a lot is we love our way of life.
Yes,
we love home.
Vermont. Chainsaws.
Thank you all.
thank you. Dave, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would say, what Donna was saying about communication, get it out there. It's like you constantly talking about stuff. So, the older generation reads print. The younger generation doesn't know what a newspaper is. So, a combination of the both. And, you can lead from behind, you can lead from the front. And, I'm super involved in my community, so I put on all kinds of events and stuff like that. So I got a lot of people talking to me about this stuff. And my wife kind of calls me the mayor of Littleton, even though we don't have mayors here, we have a select board. But it's just being super involved in the community, and it rubs off on the kids that I'm working with. They see what I'm doing. I do a giant jack-o'-lantern event every October called the Gathering of the Jack-o'-lanterns, where we put 500 jack-o'-lanterns out on the river. And I get the kids involved. They're carving the pumpkins. They see me doing it. They're like, oh, okay, this is fun. So just leading by example, but also really communicating and showing what's out there, and just being selfless about it. Is like, just get it out, keep getting it out, keep talking about it, and that makes it happen. Just make your community I say, I'm not coaching that kid's baseball team or any of that other stuff. I'm out there trying to make our community a better place, a fun place to live.
Excellent, thank you. Well, those are great closing words. Thank you all for joining and for sharing your stories and sharing your expertise and your experiences. It's really been great to hear from each of you. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the attendees for joining today. Thanks for hopping on in the middle of the day. And I also want to thank our funder, the USDA Rural Development, and other funding sources that have supported this series. I also want to point out that we are going to be putting an evaluation link in the chat, and that there will be a follow-up that comes out with the recording of this webinar, as well as all of the different things that were mentioned, different links and programs and things that were mentioned during the webinar will be included in that follow-up as well. And if I didn't mention it, also the recording of this webinar will be in that follow-up. If you're interested in learning more about another Northern Forest Center program area, I encourage all of you to attend a webinar that's coming up next week that our forest economy colleagues are hosting. It's called Telling the Story: Incorporating Stewardship, Sourcing, and Local Benefit into Wood Products Marketing. And this takes place on September 29th at noon. And you see the registration link is on the slide there. We'll also make sure that it's in the follow-up. The webinar is going to feature 3 wood product businesses that are examples of doing a great job of incorporating their story into their marketing, highlighting stewardship, connecting to the community, chain of custody, and supporting other local businesses. So encourage you to jump on that if you can. And especially hearing the importance of telling stories, which we really heard about today. this webinar is also going to focus on how telling those stories can really develop programs and marketing for these businesses and be a part of what makes them successful. So hop on that if you can. The next webinar in this series, excuse me, will be on November 15th, and it will focus on community forests. And our colleague Julie Renaud Evans and others with expertise in establishing and stewarding these community forests will be a part of that webinar. So all those links and registration will be available. And I apologize, the slide that's up is the next one in the community investment series. So thanks again. Appreciate everybody joining and have a great rest of your day.